Hi, everybody. Welcome to Conversations with Calvin, We the Species. We are officially on air. Got my little on air button there. And this is big time stuff. Um, I've actually been sitting here with Alexander Karp, and we've been chatting for over an hour about the world, about ETHA Botanicals and the company that he founded. And it's a wow for me to talk about Kratom and health and journeys. And we were sharing some amazing things because I'm such a believer in the pursuit of health, because I'm an official octogenarian, and because you live a healthy life and you do the right things, you could be performing at such a high level at 80 or 9, whatever. And Alexander's journey is amazing, and that's why this is critically important, a critically major important interview for folks. Uh, he's a research engineer, he's an entrepreneur, he's a co-founder of ETHA Natural Botanicals, which is a science-driven company, and we're going to talk all about that. This is life, this is health, this is your life. That used to be a TV program in the 50s, before your time. Not my time, but before. So this is live fully and thrive. There's just so much, there's so many elements to this. Uh, um, and what's fascinating about Alexander, he's a Chicago guy, and he went to Purdue. And as soon as I heard Purdue, my eyes and ears lit up because Rutgers won their only Big Ten game 2 weeks ago because they beat Purdue football. And even more interesting, besides Alexander's, and he'd tell you all about it, is living in California, is he's in Prague now, or a little town near Prague. Nevertheless, he's in Prague. So, put all this together, ladies and gentlemen, this is one fascinating interview. So, my official Johnny Carson monologue has concluded. Why don't you do a little intro, Alexander, and then we'll jump in to your world.
Calvin, thank you so much for having me on your show. Yeah, like I said, talking to you in the last hour or so has been fascinating to get to know you a little bit and hear about your journey. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of synergies that have aligned with my passions, my journey, and just curiosity seems to be a really good fit with us.
Perfect.
Uh, I grew up in the Chicago suburbs, and I always played competitive soccer growing up. But however, I had this kind of pain in my back when I was in high school. And for about 2 months, I had to sit out of playing soccer and kind of rehab my back. But then it really wasn't getting better. I went to my HMO doctor, just still wasn't getting what I needed to. And finally, I went to a chiropractor because my soccer coach was recommending it. And, this was back, many years ago now at this point when, and especially in the Midwest, chiropractors weren't maybe as renowned or kind of credible as we kind of see some of the benefits now. So I was kind of hesitant to go. But that going to that chiropractor was absolutely amazing for my back at that point. And that's what kind of taught me that, okay, maybe I need to, take health and wellness into my own hands. Because if I just go to a doctor, they're kind of going to do their therapy and their kind of, decision tree map of what they know to do. But it's not really that great for my chronic pain. And that was kind of the start of just having to care for my back as best as I could. But as I got older, and as I, went through engineering school, got my first job with Hewlett Packard doing research and design, product development. I got to work with some really amazing, fascinating people. I got to work on very challenging, hard problems and learned an immense amount of skills, and just was very thankful for that opportunity. But I knew I wanted to go off into entrepreneurship at a young age, and so I started venturing towards that path. And once I finally went into entrepreneurship, I think as most people will know who are an entrepreneur, it's definitely a lifestyle and is a very stressful lifestyle. There's some amazing, wins, and you get to learn, you get to conquer some great goals, but then there's also a lot of stress that comes with it.
Hmm.
And so in 2016, I was full into my entrepreneurship struggles and triumphs, but my back was also kind of getting worse. So when I used to have my back pain, I would maybe have like an episode or a flare up that would happen once a year, once every 2 years. And it would last for maybe a few days or a week, and it would kind of work its way out. That that time in between those severe episodes got shorter, and then the amount of time that my back, debilitated me got longer.
Hmm.
So much so that in 2016, my back went out, and I think I was about 4 or 5 months into this pain episode. And
Wow.
I'd stopped playing sports. I'd stopped being able to exercise. I stopped even going out with my friends. And that's when that severe chronic pain started then going into like mental pain. So that was kind of some of my thoughts were like, oh, okay, is this my back? Like it's not going to get better? Is it just going to be this way forever now? And I was kind of like irritated and grumpy because this like horrible, horrible pain is not. I wasn't a good mood to be around as others would tell you at that time. And I went to my doctors. I had MRI done, and in my lower back between my L5 S1 vertebrae, I had just a degenerating disc. So all they could tell me was hereditary, degenerating. Here's some physical therapy. Did that. Tried muscle relaxants. I did inversion tables. I would do a lot of yoga, stretching. I tried all sorts of other alternative medications, maybe like CBD, cannabis. Yeah, I can't remember everything I did, but nothing was helpful at that time. And fortunately, my business partner now, Victor, he heard about a plant called Kratom on a early Joe Rogan podcast. And so
Wow.
kratom is a plant from Southeast Asia. It grows in the jungle. And traditionally, laborers, like farmers, would just pick a leaf and then chew on it. And that would give them a little bit of energy, kind of take away some pain and discomfort. It was kind of like their alternative to having coffee, essentially.
Wow.
And now what people do is primarily grows in Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, so in Southeast Asia. And people pick the leaves, dry it, and then grind it into like a fine powder. So it looks very similar almost to like matcha green tea, but it has its own unique smell and a very bitter taste to it. And I want to say about 20, the estimate somewhere around 25 million Americans or more on a daily basis consume kratom. And
Wow.
it's primarily used for energy, kind of like I don't want to drink coffee. I want like more of a boost in energy and mood. The other third of people use it for severe physical pain or chronic pain. And then there's another group that uses it more for mental pain, so like anxiety, focus, depression.
Wow. Um, I've done I've studied you.
Mhm.
And you talk a lot about alkaloids and that word. A lot of people know what it is, but it's the ingredients in the botanical. These little phytochemicals, and that's what gives these the identity. So, um, when and how did you start using kratom?
Yeah, so this was, I think, December of 2016.
Uh-huh.
After we listened to this podcast, and since I'd tried so many other options and nothing was working for me, kratom it's unregulated, so it's widely available. So like we could Google kratom, let's just order some online, and it was like, all right, let's try it. And Victor and I, we got these little packages in the mail, little like Ziploc bag almost with some like handwritten varieties on it. And okay, well, let's take some and try it. So we would take a scoop, like a tablespoon, put in a glass of water, and then drink it. And then about, say, 15, 20 minutes later, at this time, Victor and I were in the same office. We had a business together, and so we were entrepreneurs, kind of just working away. And all of a sudden, 20 minutes later, Victor turns around and he's like, "Hey, how are you feeling?" And I was like, "Oh, well, like for the first time, I forgot about my back pain. So I
Wow.
was 5 months into this, pain episode where I just life was not working for me at that point. Like, I would just move slightly, or I would sneeze, or like I'd try to laugh, and like that pain would be so intense that it would just rip me out of the present moment, just into that pain. And so I went from that state into essentially forgetting about the pain, and I just got focused on my work. And that pain went from a 9 or a 10 to a 2 or a 3, and it was like just getting back to normal. And so it was that kind of, it was this weird mix of being very subtle, as far as the overall effect of kratom was very subtle, but the pain reduction was very dramatic.
Wow. Were there any, Alexander, were there any particular challenges that you faced when you started taking the kratom?
Yes, I mean, like, so I said that, kratom has this really unique smell, characteristic smell and taste, and so it's a very bitter compound. And it is a whole leaf ground powder is what we were first consuming. But imagine trying to do something similar to the cinnamon challenge, at least once a day. Like, so like for me, when I had chronic pain that bad, I was using kratom 2 to 3 times a day. So, I would take this tablespoon of fine powder substance, and the taste is not pleasant. So it was like, okay, so how do we, do we mix it into something like orange juice or yogurt to cover the taste? Well, unfortunately, kratom has such a strong flavor component to it that now, instead of just trying to, eat a tablespoon of kratom, now I have, say, a full, cup of yogurt that just tastes like kratom. So we couldn't mask the flavor of it.
Okay.
So the most common method, or one of our common methods, is called toss and wash, where we just take a scoop of powder, put it in our mouth, and then drink water as fast as we can to get it down so you don't taste it. So just that kind of consumer experience, or experience when you use it, was very inadequate, to say the least. But then on the bigger challenge was that, at the time, we were ordering kratom, and there were a lot of varieties of kratom, at least supposedly. We go to any of these websites, and there'd be 40 or 50 different types of kratom, like white vein, greenhorn,
Wow.
red poly, Maitendov, all sorts of names. And so like we just kind of like, so we did is we started ordering all these samples, and then doing kind of like a self-experimentation, kind of like, trying to be a little like scientist, where we like take one version. Okay, I'd give Victor some, I'd take some, and we try to record on a spreadsheet. Okay, how does this make me feel? How much should I take? And go down that path. But we found that, okay, it wasn't really, we weren't really discovering which varieties were better or worse for us. And so much so, like, we would order the same type of kratom from the same vendor, and then that new batch or that new version, even though it was supposed to be like labeled the same, didn't work for us. So this inconsistency was also a big challenge for us.
Wow. Wow.
And so what happened is, I mean, as mentioned, I'm an engineer by training, just curiosity. I mean, I knew I wanted to be an engineer probably when I was 5 years old. That was kind of the joke of, what you want to be when you grow up. And my dad was an engineer, went on to start his own business. My mom was also a pharmacist. So she
Oh,
went
wow.
from research pharmacy,
Wow.
to hospital pharmacy, and then finally ended up at retail pharmacy. So she kind of saw this whole span of the pharmacy industry, and I just kind of was, absorbed some of that knowledge growing up with her as my mother. And so she'd always have, all these kind of little bit of tidbits of how these different drugs actually worked, or kind of what the mechanism of action was. And then most importantly, because the pharmacist, when she ended up in retail, and the pharmacist was essentially the person interacting with the patient who was receiving the pharmaceuticals, they would, I was surprised to learn how much responsibility pharmacists had. Because I mean, now a lot of the records, say from doctors, are tied together in a computer system. But that only happened in the last, what, like 5 to 8 years or less. So that means when a pharmacist would, see a patient, and it'd be like, okay, here's this prescription, it'd be on the pharmacist to say, well, if I give you these two medications, like, this could likely kill you. Or, oh, okay, well, you're getting this reaction to this medication. Well, what supplements are you taking? So it was kind of on their responsibility. And so that was where my mom also had a lot of knowledge on supplements, some of those mechanisms of action and what actually worked, didn't work. So just that kind of core knowledge of having engineering degree, curiosity, and then kind of growing up around that pharmaceutical pharmacist,
Yeah.
that led me into, well, okay, this kratom is a miracle for my back pain. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. Well, this sounds like an engineering challenge. Let me see if I can find a test to identify the active ingredient, because we know this, this plant material, just like green tea has caffeine that is responsible for kind of the alertness in the morning. Well, what's causing kratom to work for me? And so that went down this path of understanding alkaloids that are in kratom. And there's a variety of alkaloids, and there's some alkaloids that are unique to kratom only. And so the main alkaloid is called mitragynine, which is a fascinating pharmacokinetic activity that interacts with multiple receptors in the body. And then there's other versions similar to mitragynine, like a painanthine, speciogenine, speciosalatin, that also have interaction with other receptors. And so what we did is we started getting samples of kratom and sending it out to a laboratory to identify how much of these alkaloids were in each batch.
Wow.
And that's what kind of drove us into being able to get a consistent personal experience. So if I, had a batch of kratom that had 0.5% of mitragynine, and then versus another batch that had 1%, well, I would just take twice the amount of that 0.5%, and I would get kind of this consistent essential effect from that.
Right.
And it's
So,
basically, yeah.
yeah, you said some interesting things. First of all, your mom was a pharmacist. I was a pharmacist. And
Yeah.
I've said this many, many times. My education, my 6 years and a year of internship was such a broad-based education. It covered everything, so it made you think. It We pharmacists are thinkers,
Mhm.
and that's what we were taught to think, 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 and always on our toes. And it's a great background. You also touched on uh, the thing that I've learned with the world of botanicals, is consistency from one batch to the
Mm.
next batch. So that we'll talk about that, how
Yes.
important that is, and the fact that it's unregulated. It's an unregulated entity, and therefore no claims really can be made, just generalizations. I
Yep.
know that. But we'll talk about that. While you were taking the kratom, were there any other health practices and things you were doing alongside that? Um,
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's one thing that I've kind of learned is that there's kind of this mantra or saying that pain is the ultimate teacher. And so when I was going through all these pain issues with my back, that's what led me to get into yoga or breath work and mindfulness. And so just appreciating that powerfulness that our own breath has and just being mindful and being able to, send my own consciousness or breath into a certain section of my body. I mean, so much so where when my back was locked up, I would be able to sit in a chair and meditate and just focus. And what I would do is I would really focus on a specific part of my back and try to relax the muscles. And I would literally hear my spinal cord realign, kind of like going to the chiropractor when you hear like a joint like relax and like pop or crack, that alignment sound. I would get that just from being able to slowly kind of bring, my own focus back in my body and then try to breathe and relax into like my back or my stomach or that side. So that kind of health direction started me in all sorts of good habits to be in. I
yeah,
mean, obviously, like working out, doing a lot of core strength exercises, being healthy as far as eating real food, less and minimal processed food, trying to cut out sugar, getting enough hydration,
yes,
uh, and then also going down the path of okay, well, there's a lot of tools available as far as blood work that I can do and kind of see if I'm low in magnesium or potassium. I saw that I was low in vitamin D, I think like 2 years ago when I did a blood work. So, okay, I need to get that
Yeah.
supplementation. And vitamin
Smart.
D is an amazing,
Correct.
uh, amazing vitamin, but it's really more of a hormone and kind of a precursor to a lot of hormones in our system. And I would say too, what I learned about this journey as well is that when I would Google Kratom, I would kind of see all these headlines of, oh, this is bad, this is dangerous, don't do this, or we don't know about it. But then when I went to, say, NIH.gov and went to the library, medicinal library, to look at published research, and I would go to the primary data, so find these research articles, get into the actual results within the research paper, and kind of look at every little data point, I would start to be able to form my own conclusions, not kind of what these Google headlines were saying, but I was like, well, this research that I'm actually reading tells me a different story that I would, conclude based on this actual information. And then when I take this kratom substance, I'm also getting a similar effect to what this research says, not what these headlines say over here. So that kind of methodology of being able to dive deep into some of these topics, whether it's kratom or Tongkat Ali or other, like, vitamin D, trying to get to that primary data, that's a big part that I've learned how to, be my own detective and get to that side, and then maybe do some self experimentation to either
Smart.
kind of like confirm that research or disprove it. And then that kind of has set me on a better health and wellness journey.
I'm so, I'm listening to you and everything you're saying. I'm so there. I'm so there. Uh, um, One anecdote, the exercise part, we have no clue how important. We hear it all the time. I'll
Mhm.
give you an example real fast. My own long story. Almost 2 years ago, January 17th, 2024, my family came, my kids and grandkids, and they called me, and I was watching some football, and I took one step, and I was upstairs, and I fell down 7 steps.
Ooh.
7 steps. I'm 6'5", by the way. I'm a big guy. Fell down
Oh,
seven
wow.
steps with such force that when I hit the landing, it then propelled me to turn around and somersault down 4 more steps,
Oh,
putting my hand through a wall. Uh, and guess what? I got up and walked away without a scratch, without nothing. Nothing. Now,
yeah.
there's a lot of ways to, and I called all my doctors the next morning to get my head x-rayed, having a brain bleed. What's the story? All four of the main doctors I called said, Calvin, you should have died.
Hmm.
You should have died. Nobody 78 falls down 11 steps and somersaults, gets up and walk away. So I've done some deep soul searching, and one of the ingredients to that, besides the spiritual element, is the fact that I've exercised voraciously for a long, long time,
Yeah.
and my calcium and D I've always been on top of. So
Uh,
yes, and that's why I was
mhm.
so interested, Alexander, what you were saying, because I did a bone density thing, and I'm off the charts and all that. So there are a lot of different components why I didn't break a neck, a back, whatever. Uh, Beside the spiritual thing, and one of them is the lifestyle, which you're talking about, how important that is, uh, and
Yeah.
and your message, my message. It's such an easy message. You can write your ship early on and have a wonderful life, like that movie that comes out Christmas. Have a wonderful life if you do the right things. If you stop watching people dance for 2 minutes on TikTok and you pay attention to things, you can have a wonderful life. Maybe I'm a poster boy for that. Anyway, did we touch specifically what, and we talked about alkaloids, specifically what is it with kratom? Because, as I looked on the products that you offer, there's a wide variety of products. Discomfort, hormone balance, stress and sleep. And I do want to mention, people really check your sleep thing out, because 2 nights ago,
Very
a really nasty article on melatonin came out, did some really nasty findings about that, that it can cause some real serious problems, heart failure and stuff. So finding an alternative for that can be a wonderful. But anyway, so
yeah.
what
Yeah,
what?
so kratom, the main alkaloid in kratom is called mitragynine. And so now what's fascinating about mitragynine to begin with is that it is a multiple receptor agonist. So it interacts with opioid receptors, serotonin receptors, dopamine receptors, and alpha-adrenergic receptors.
Uh,
And so that covers, which is interesting is that it's almost like self-regulating in some of these ways, because some of these receptors, when you activate them, if it's a single, say, drug molecule that only activates that receptor, it's more associated with sedation. But if you activate, say, the alpha-adrenergic receptor or the serotonin receptor, that's where you kind of get into like this seizure side of overactivation. So the fact that mitragynine interacts with these multiple receptors is very, very fascinating. So the mu opioid receptor that kratom interacts with is primarily thought of as one of the major pain receptors. So this is where opiates, which are going to be morphine codeine that are derived from the poppy plant, those are opiates that only interact with the mu opioid receptor. And that's what it is. Morphine's been used for pain relief. But kratom, while it does interact with that receptor, it also seems to have this what's called like a ceiling effect or a plateau effect. So if a little bit of mitragynine goes into the receptor, there's a small response. If you add more, it gets to a larger response, say more pain relief. But at some point, it kind of hits this plateau and it doesn't keep increasing. And that's kind of the important part because well, it's important for many reasons. One is thought that that's why mitragynine is more non-addictive or helps people with substance abuse disorder, as well as, I mean, like I said, pain is kind of like that teacher. So like if I have this injury, I don't want to just take something, get my pain down to zero, and then maybe do something that uses my body and then makes that injury worse.
yeah,
So the nice part is that kratom still has a response of your body that pain is still signaling enough to kind of give the important information.
which is
So much
great.
so,
Keeps you at a
yeah,
two. It keeps you at a two.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
That's
yeah,
it.
exactly. Yep. I mean,
Wow.
so much so is that my business partner actually finally located this injury he had in his hip, one of his hip, I think, ligaments or tendons. He punctured a hole in it like 20 or 30 years ago, but no one was able to identify it. He got it identified and he went to a stem cell clinic to get stem cells. But interestingly enough, when you get stem cells, your body needs to have that stress signal. So they can't give you pain medications like non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, NSAIDs, but you can take kratom because since it has that ceiling effect, it will keep the pain down to a smaller level, but it doesn't go away. So your body still gets the signal to get the
Wow.
stem cells, right? So absolutely amazing. So
Wow.
it's that pain side to kratom. And also the other part that scientists think about the addiction profile of classical opiates is that opiates recruit this communication pathway called beta arrestin. And when someone consumes more beta arrestin, or sorry, more opiates, they recruit more and more beta arrestin. And there's no ceiling effect to opiates. So people keep consuming them, and then more beta arrestin, once that's kind of depleted too much, that's when people literally stop breathing. So that's where when someone passes away from an opioid overdose, it's because their respiratory system just stops functioning. Kratom is a G protein agonist. And so we see some respiratory depression, but it doesn't keep increasing with higher and higher doses. So it seems to be much, much safer on that side. Now, the other receptors, yes, I mean, just to give an example, the serotonin receptor, provides kind of like this mood boost or increase in focus. And so that's where it's both, for me, kratom has this really nice physical pain relief. But then I kind of feel, just like today's going to be a good day. And I feel like, this, like what I'm worrying about, okay, I can accomplish this problem at work, or like this is not that bad. I can get into the activity of life. I don't get held up by some of these maybe internal questions or anxiety that I have that pops up.
Okay. Um, it's fascinating stuff. But I don't know if you watch me, I'm taking notes. I'm maybe the only interviewer on the planet who, while he's interviewing, I'm taking notes. And I circled on my notes here multiple receptor because that explains
Yeah.
so much stuff. I have that little background. Now you said something which amazed me. Before 25 million people, are using Kratom. Are there, in particular, any top reasons why people would, besides, obviously the pain relief?
Yeah, there's kind of the say lifestyle enhancement. So like boost in energy, kind of replacement for coffee. That's kind of like the simple, okay, I want a little more energy, I want to feel a little bit better, I want to start my day. There's the physical pain or mental pain. So and the physical pain can be anything, some like mild aches and pains, like for like my knees are kind of hurting just as I get older, to well, I have severe back pain from jamming disc, and that's kind of a big span of pain. And that's also where people consume different amounts of kratom, both based on their own personal body chemistry, how they respond to it, as well as then kind of what their use case is. It's like, if I just want to have a little bit of boost in energy, I'm going to use a lot less kratom than if I'm having severe chronic pain.
Okay.
Then there is a growing trend in substance use disorder that people consume kratom for, because it interacts with some of those same receptors that people develop addictions to. Kratom can basically satiate some of those withdrawal symptoms, but with that ceiling effect and that G protein agonism, it doesn't reinforce the addiction, as well as then. So apparently, one of the major, or one of the withdrawal effects from opiates is that when people stop using opiates, the body then kind of say, swings back to the other pendulum and kind of overexcites some of these receptors. So this alpha adrenergic receptor starts getting overstimulated when you stop opiates. But where kratom, that mitragynine, interacts with that system, can help kind of with this broad spectrum of issues. And that's why it's such a fascinating compound. And that's just mitragynine. The other interesting part is that our body produces some secondary metabolites of those products, as well as other alkaloids. And so I know you mentioned kind of back where we have, ETHA, we have a range of everything from kind of morning energy blends to like midday focus to then kind of more of the evening time. And so, example, painanthine is an alkaloid in kratom that is more researched for muscle relaxation. And so that's why we have some of these blends that are higher in painanthine, because that kind of correlates to this evening time use. As well as I've also found too that the body is really good at adapting or protecting itself. And so, as an example, when I would have severe back pain, sometimes I would get almost what I call like secondary pain, where I get the acute pain from maybe the spinal cord itself, or some of that nerve issue, but then my muscles really tighten up around the back to try to protect it. And so that's where I would take, say, ETHA Sunset, and that would have just as higher painanthine in it, and that would allow my body to kind of relax the muscles again, allow me to kind of open up and kind of get away with that tension.
Boy, you know your stuff. You're throwing out terms. I used to kind of know some of that stuff from pharmacy school. Um, uh, how would somebody start using kratom safely?
Yeah, very good question. I would say the first thing would be to find a vendor that is testing kratom. And so the basic tests that we like to see would be potency testing. So like what alkaloids and what percentage of alkaloids are in kratom. And then the other main tests are what's common for dietary ingredients. So this would be looking for heavy metals, and then looking for biologic contamination. So especially like E. coli, salmonella, and then just overall mold and yeast. So that those tests are the big ones. And then if it's a kratom extract, I would also recommend what's called a residual solvent test. So this is where extracts are made. Extracts are very commonly made for all sorts of food products. And extracts can be very, very good because it creates a standard amount of active ingredient, can remove heavy metals during that processing or other kind of unwanted, plant or botanical parts. But we want to make sure that that manufacturer is using FDA approved or, safe solvents that aren't going to make its way into the final product. So starting with, okay, go to a vendor that is going to publish their certificates of analysis, show you their testing for the alkaloid potency, heavy metals, biologics, and then maybe residual solvents if it's an extract. Now with that, then like I said earlier, everyone, I think it's actually what I'm liking that's happening in our medical industry is that doctors in our pharmaceutical industry is being more open about individuals have different responses to medication. And so kind of more this personalized medic or personalized healthcare is what they're calling it. And so what they find is that there's kind of say like three categories of people. There's people that are slow metabolizers of food and drugs, kind of average or long or fast metabolizers. So, and what that means is that basically either drugs can be either you can be more sensitive to them or less sensitive depending on who you are. And so if you kind of know that, you got to know that about yourself, or at least just kind of like, start to see how you respond, increase the dosage and see what works for you. So there's that personalized side to it, and
Okay.
then kind of what you're using it for. And so when we take all that into account, what we find is that on average, people consume about 1 gram to 5 grams of dried leaf kratom per dose. And that dose is going to be mostly effective for like 4 to 5, 6 hours, kind of depending on what it is, because that's the half-life
That's fine.
of the alkaloids. And so people will take kratom anywhere from 1 to 3 times per day. So now, like when my pain is really bad, I will take kratom 3 times a day. Other days when I'm doing all my exercises and stretching, I'll take kratom just kind of once in the morning and I'm okay.
Off topic.
Yeah.
Off topic. Um, I interviewed uh, a year or two ago a professor from Cornell, and he wrote a book laying over there, Our Changing Menu, how things that we eat and consume are disappearing from the earth due to climate change. So my next question to you, uh, um, so you told me, Indonesia and Southeast Asia where this comes from, two-pronged. Watch where I go with this. So,
Mhm.
as the earth is heating up and we ain't going to stop it. Even Bill Gates, I said 2 years ago, there's no way we're going to keep the earth from heating up, stopping it at 1.5 degrees. There's no way we're going to do that. And I said that 2 years ago. And Bill Gates, 2 days ago, said we can't. So we better find a ways to live with it. So my question,
Wow.
Alexander, two-pronged. Is climate change going to affect temperature and affect kratom? That's A, and B. Since the other parts of the globe is heating up, can it be grown somewhere else?
Yeah, yeah, great questions. I mean, so kratom is a tropical tree, grows in tropical rainforests or in regions that are tropical. So I think at least from, I would say, near term climate change, because as the way I understand it, current climate change, places that receive some water or storms may receive more. Some places that are kind of prone to droughts will kind of get maybe longer or more frequent droughts. But it seems like tropical zones, at least right now, are more just kind of continual throughout the year. So I think there's a little bit maybe it's not going to be affected as near as some of other regions of the planet, fortunately. I would say too that kratom is a very strong growing tree. And so this is a tree that likes to grow along river banks in the jungle. So literally, as the water, kratom will start growing underwater and then up onto the
Wow.
bank as it kind of turns into the actual forest floor of that jungle. So kratom can survive fully submerged underwater, or it can survive in, very dry
Wow.
soil. It just doesn't grow quite as fast. So at least it's a very, you
Hardy.
know, hardy tree. I mean, I would say also it's a great, this is a great part of what like I want to say grow kratom farms, and we've been doing a lot of research on growing kratom in a greenhouse, working with Thailand,
Yeah.
understanding that
Yeah.
process, and starting to go down that path. And so, in addition to just trying to create kratom as a consistent known supply for what we need to help people on the benefit side of it, there's also, well, we're growing trees. We're going to be start carbon, we're capturing carbon out of the air by growing these trees and harvesting the leaves. We're kind of doing,
You're doing your
I mean,
part.
yeah, that process of just planting and growing trees is great on its own. Plus, now we're going to harvest the leaves and give those leaves to other people that will eat them and get other benefit from it. It's kind of like this compounding beneficial effect.
Okay. Okay. Um, Sometimes I like to, often I go off topic. So take a
Perfect.
deep
Yeah.
breath. A couple of questions I borrowed actually from Barbara Walters. So be it. So excluding family or friends, somebody living or dead you'd like to spend a day with.
Um,
And it could be
so
a couple. If you have a couple, there's no rules here.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I did hear someone else gave this answer once that I really liked, and because you said family or friends, and someone said, well, could I talk to myself like 10 years in the future, or could I talk to myself 10 years in the past? That would be a really
Wow,
cool
that's heavy
experience.
stuff.
Yeah, yeah, that I
Wow.
thought was like that's a good answer. I'm
Interesting.
gonna steal that one. Yes.
Interesting. Often, not often, but I always, and I've not often, but I pondered that I take me and I put me to where I was when I was like a freshman in college and talk to myself,
Mm,
freshman in college. The changes I went from then to now. It's an
yeah.
interesting, that's what you just said. It's interesting answer. I like that. I never got that before. I've done 400 of these. So, you have some favorite movies, Alexander?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, in general, I like movies that are like give me, say, plausible deniability about suspending reality. So ones that kind of allow me to really get engaged in the movie and kind of like make everything is like coherent and I really believe it's happening. And so like I mean, and that can be anything from like Batman Begins was one of my favorite Batman movies to like I don't know James Bond Casino Royale, which is like a very realistic of all the scenes were very like plausible. But I mean even going into say I mean I really liked Harry Potter as far as the books, so I enjoyed a few of those movies. And then I would say the other category of movies that I really enjoy would be around movies that are not chronological in order. So ones that have multiple story elements that kind of maybe jump around a little bit. And then at the end, all kind of like tie back together and really, make sense or like an epiphany moment. Those are kind of the ones I also really
Okay.
enjoy.
Okay. I always like that movie thing because I'm an old movie person. I guess I watching Casablanca changed my whole life around
Oh,
irrevocably.
yeah.
So anyway, all right, back to work. Are there any negative effects and precautions that people should know about before they take kratom?
I mean, like every substance, compound, food, there can be negative effects, of course. Fortunately, with kratom, it does seem to be mild as long as people consume it in a proper way. So, in overconsumption routes, so if people are consuming, say, more than 8 grams per serving, say like 40, 100 grams a day, like very high amounts, there can be like nausea. So some people do react to that, or they eat the plant material, they get nauseous from it. There can be constipation. I know when I heard about some of this kind of research, I did, and well, so there are two things, right? So like I heard about some of this research of, okay, constipation could be there. Doesn't really seem to be any life-threatening side from kind of like that respiratory issue. So I'm good there. But supposedly at high doses, kratom can be sedating. And that was kind of some of this old term, right? And like since then, the actual research, say from Dr. Chris McCurdy at University of Florida, shows that kratom overdose or overconsumption actually looks more like a seizure where you're kind of overexcited. So that was not, so that was completely disconfirmed. But when I first heard about this, I was like, well, to your point, sleep is so important, and I've had some issues ever since high school, just not being maybe diligent about putting away the TV or the YouTube and kind of like going to bed when I should, turning down lights. I do a lot of that practice now, at least when I'm diligent and being healthy. But so, okay, I've struggled with sleep, and that's kind of running my family. So I was like, well, kratom could be sedate. It was great for my pain relief. And supposedly I read this at higher doses, it's sedating. Well, maybe that'll help me with my sleep. So I consumed, I think about 30 grams of kratom. So a very high dose. I wanted to see, because like I wanted to see what it would happen. And I remember getting some like, yeah, very upset stomach. It kind of just felt like nauseous and like I didn't like it. But that passed after about, say, half an hour, 45 minutes. And then I went to my bed and was kind of doing some emails, like, okay, well, I'm gonna wait for this to kind of like, function, kick in, put me to sleep. Like this is gonna be great. So I'm gonna have a best night's sleep ever. And I think around maybe 2 hours later, as I was just diligently super focused working away, I was like, well, this definitely isn't true. It's not sedating for me. So, okay, it's not helpful. And I did experience constipation with that, obviously, and that was probably the first time that I've felt really what that feels like.
Hmm.
And it just, I mean, it lasted for, I want to say 6 hours or 8 hours, kind of like, after the next morning, afternoon, it was okay. So, fortunately, it kind of subsided relatively quickly. So that's kind of more of the, I'll call it the acute negative side effects. There can be habit formation or technically addiction, very similar to like what caffeine would be.
Hmm.
So from what's called like I think it's the SOAS scale, the subjective opioid withdrawal scale. Kratom ranks about a 9 on that level, which is mild. And like I said, that's kind of in the exact same category as caffeine addiction. So, I mean, of course, some people are going to be different. And I think from the years of talking to a lot of kratom consumers and being in this industry, advocating literally all over the world and getting to understand how this interacts with people, I would say there was a caveat for people who seem to have had a prior addiction to opiates. That can be a more severe withdrawal effect. And then there's an additional layer on top of that where people have found that they can take mitragynine extract and convert it into a metabolite called 7-hydroxymitragynine. And this is what is causing now a lot of confusion because some people think 7-hydroxymitragynine is the same as kratom, and it's very not the same. So now 7-hydroxy. Now, kind of like we said earlier in the program, there's really nothing that's truly good or bad in this world. I mean, everything, even morphine and technically fentanyl, have some, drastic uses in a hospital, and so there are, precautions on that. But 7-hydroxy is more of a pure opioid agonist. So that's going to lead people more into a very problematic addiction standpoint. And so there's got to be a lot more caution if people choose that path. And I say that there are some people that maybe do need that just because my dad is in his 80s. He has not, unfortunately, taken care of his health as much as he should have, just even simple things of nutrition, drinking water. And as much as I wish he would, and as much as I used to get into fights with him about trying to help convince him to do things better, I learned well, okay, I'm just fighting with him and angry and we're yelling and it's like and he's not changing, so I'm not enjoying the time. He's not getting better with this. Let me just stop that and kind of just enjoy the time with him. So I'm in a better place on that side. But there are there are some severe pain cases where 7-OH does help with really, really severe pain. It does still seem to be a G protein agonist, so that respiratory depression liability is lower. But 7-hydroxymitragynine is what's called self-reinforcing. So this is kind of like a famous way we look at if something is addictive. We'll take a mouse or a rat, put it in a cage and isolate it, and give it an option to say, take water that's laced with heroin. And then it can sit there and go to that water and drink as much as it wants. And basically, when it's self reinforcing, it means that that rat chooses to keep going back to that water over and over and over until eventually it just literally passes away and it doesn't function. It doesn't, it's that side. And so when that study is done with mitragynine, the rat, you can actually take a rat that's addicted to heroin, substitute in mitragynine, and the rat will use less mitragynine over time. It's almost self-corrective,
Uh-huh.
which is great. And that's what's, the main ingredient in natural kratom. And that's why we get all these benefits. We don't see this abuse potential. There's a lot of great parts of that natural plant. 7-hydroxymitragynine does have self-reinforcement. So the brat does keep increasing its usage and keep going down that path. I don't know if the mortality is there. So, 7-hydroxy may be, say, better than some other pharmaceuticals as an option, but it's still, it shouldn't be just available widely. People need to know what they're taking, need to be a lot more cautious with that than just the natural plant kratom.
Okay. Okay. Um, Current legal, we touched on this before we went on air, the current legal status of kratom, internationally in the states, federal, state. I mean, it's not really regulated, but
Yeah, it's an evolving story for
yeah,
sure. So it's kratom is federally unregulated in the US, which good parts and bad parts. It's good because kratom is accessible, especially to, researchers, consumers that need it. It also means that it's unregulated. So, like Victor and I had some challenges of finding quality tested kratom. It means that you don't necessarily know what you're going to get as a consumer unless you do a lot more due diligence. So federally unregulated, but because of the, say, concerns and some of this misinformation that started in 2016, the FDA tried to do this emergency scheduling of kratom. And this was at the time when synthetic marijuana, spice, bath salts, all these other compounds were causing some problems as well. So they kind of jumped on that fear side of it. And they wanted to ban kratom outright in 2016. Just in an emergency scheduling, I would say we always need to be cautious as citizens whenever there's an emergency provision or emergency attached to something, because it generally means that regulatory standard practices or kind of the information and process is bypassed and legislation is just made without kind of public input and all these safeguards in place. Fortunately, though, because, as we mentioned earlier, 25 million Americans, a lot of people are using kratom. They all started speaking up, saying, "Hey, I use kratom. It helps me. I don't know what you're talking about. We don't see these problems." And it was everyone from consumers to lawyers to doctors to EMT technicians to firefighters, all across the board. And literally the DEA, because so the way scheduling works is that the FDA makes a recommendation, and then NIDA, National Institute of Drug Abuse, is supposed to be the sister organization to confirm that result. Now, with this emergency scheduling, FDA just made the recommendation, and that gave the DEA the authority to actually ban kratom. But because so many people called in, literally flooded tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of comments to the DEA, the
uh-huh.
first time ever the DEA rescinded their intent to schedule. The only time they've ever done this. And the
Right.
DEA likes to regulate, they like to enforce any law they can. And because of what they saw of this public
Yeah.
benefit that freedom create causes and kind of what people were saying about it, they decided to actually back down and say, okay, we can't just do this. Like, let's let the science actually come out. Let's do more research. Let's let that kind of
Wow.
go through the process.
That's
So
huge. Huge.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, it's the
Huge.
literally only compound that's ever they've ever done that.
Wow.
It's like great story. So FDA kind of was embarrassed. Like literally, the FDA was embarrassed by this because they got embarrassed because people were like, "Well, you didn't do your job. This is not true. Like, what are you guys doing?"
Yeah.
So that came up. Great. Okay, still unregulated. But during this time, it kind of kicked some of the industry into understanding that, hey, this is unregulated. Doesn't mean that it can't be just banned or if something is not illegal, it doesn't mean that it can't be made illegal very quickly. So there's a very difference between being protected. And so that's what we wanted to do as an industry, was actually protect Kratom. And that's where the American Kratom Association has been working for the last many years now, since 2016, passing the Kratom Consumer Protection Act. And I think it's passed in now 16 states. And so this is where it puts in place common sense regulation. So Kratom must be labeled as Kratom, tested and identify the main active ingredient, how much is in each package. Can't be sold to minors, either 18 or 21, depending on the state. And then some other more, I guess, obvious regulation: can't add anything that's dangerous to it. You can't kind of manipulate it and go down this dangerous path with it. So it's really common sense regulation that I want to see as a consumer. Yeah, I don't want kids just to have free access to it. I want it to be tested. I want it to be labeled properly, and I don't want other things added to it. So it's like it's a great regulation. It's been passed in, like I said, 16 states, and there's a lot more on the path going down within the world. Yeah, there's it's mostly unregulated as well because a lot of countries follow the FDA standard,
Yeah.
but there are nuances in Europe. I'm in the Czech Republic right now because the Czech Republic is a fascinating country. That they're the first country in the European Union to start trying to regulate what they are calling cyclomodulatory substances. So this is kind of a category of botanicals in general, or mushrooms that have some kind of known, physiological effect, but they're not really quite a food. They're not quite a drug. And so right now they're kind of in this unregulated status across the world, which is not really good. I mean, like we all kind of know that unregulated is not good, and then overregulated prohibition ban is not good. We want this kind of somewhat in between middle ground. And that's where Czech Republic is taking the first steps towards these types of botanicals and compounds, to put a framework around it to really, give consumers what they want on this, basic regulation package.
Okay. I'm amazed that our DEA, our FDA rescinded because of the outcry, and so 25 million people is a lot of people, but I didn't, and I like to think I'm fairly worldly about things, but that escaped me until I started to prepare for you. And sometimes I slap myself in the face, Calvin, snap out of it, wake up, I should be more aware. So there, maybe in some small microcosmic way, what we're doing here it's just one step in the many steps that need to be taken for awareness on something that 25 million people are obviously very happy with.
Yeah.
So it is a brave new world. Um, let's talk about ETHA and the mission, and why did you start it, uh, and how, a logical question, how is ETHA different from other Kratom companies?
Yeah. So, I mean, with those two challenges of that convenience of taking this bitter powder and then having this inconsistency in the results of our Kratom usage, that's what really kind of drove us into this need of creating ETHA. And then it just really aligned with our background of being able to apply engineering resources, just curiosity. And so what we do with ETHA is that we import and now we grow kratom, but importantly, we quantify the active ingredient in kratom, and then we publish those test results to each and every package so that the consumer has the information they need to manage their health and wellness. And so we're really about transparency in that process and giving as much information to the consumer as possible, while at the same time, educating everyone about the good parts, the precautions, as well as the convenience of how to take kratom. So because I had that, use case of I was in chronic pain, taking kratom 3 times a day and trying to do this powder. Okay, even now that we were testing kratom and it was consistent, it was good quality product, I knew it was safe. It's still you can imagine this fine green powder is not pleasant to take, and it's also then I'm going to carry like a bag of powder around. How do I, if I spill it somewhere, it gets green dust everywhere. And I started to really want to create a more simple way of taking this whole leaf plant. And because, like I had that connection in all that kind of knowledge absorbed from my mother, I knew that, say, Tylenol tablets or a lot of pharmaceutical products, over-the-counter medications, actually use a binder agent called microcrystalline cellulose. And so my thought was like, well, okay, a plant leaf is also just made of cellulose. Like, can I just press this powder into a tablet? And so I started messing around with that idea and started off with kind of some hand built little tools, started kind of doing my own little tablet, like smacking things with a hammer, getting some force on it. And I kind of pushed it out and I kind of got like a little pellet. And I was like, I don't know, like that's okay. Like, I'm kind of on a directional path of like, this is possible. And I just started kind of kept innovating on that. I think about maybe a year and a half, because there was kind of one step of being able to do a prototype of a tablet of like, okay, yes, I can take this kratom powder, I can compress it into a tablet, and it makes something that I can now eat, and I get the effects of it. It's convenient. When I take a kratom tablet, it kind of just tastes a little bit like green tea. I don't get that full bitterness from it.
Right, right.
It was, and then I can, okay, put some in my pocket or put it in a bag. And then like I go mountain biking or hiking. And then when I take my tablets out, okay, I just know I take out, say, 8 tablets gives me 2.4 grams, which is what I need. And it was a simple way to measure and get the amount of kratom I needed. But then there was about another, say, I want to say year of development. So a year and a half total, just to try to make more of the manufacturing process. So, how do I scale this up? How do I make, 1,000 tablets in an hour? How do I now make 10,000 tablets in an hour? And kind of getting that development is kind of the next step after just that proof of concept of being able to press powder into a single tablet.
Alexander, do you see kratom fitting into uh, and I alluded to this, that more people need to know about this.
Mhm.
So if 25 million people yelled and screamed that they want this and got the feds to rescind, how do you see kratom fitting into a broader health and wellness movement? And part two of that is, where's kratom going to be in 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I think the CBD craze that went on where CBD kind of overpromised this world all these benefits and it was put into all these different products and you see it every place. I think that shows that the consumer wants a natural product that helps with a lot of these issues that we've talked about. But unfortunately, CBD doesn't provide those benefits. I mean, I haven't found a good use for, say, energy, pain relief, or anxiety from CBD. I mean, I know it does help with anti-seizures, and there's some definitely good use case from the research I've seen. And so I would say that in general, I think natural products are becoming more appreciated again. And I think more importantly is that we have tools available to us that was not available in the 60s and 70s. So, like I understand back in the 60s and 70s when drugs were created and the FDA had to put some regulatory framework in place, they had to go down this path of okay, it has to be a single isolated molecule that we can know what it was because we can test the effect of it. And then it has to be labeled and go through the supply chain. But now with everyone having a smartphone and the way we're developing this track and traceability where we're using say RFID tags, QR codes, individual uniquely identifiable numbers to track a tree leaf all the way to the manufacturing, to the
Wow.
exporting, to the end consumer package. and every consumer has a smartphone in their pocket. Now we're enabled to, prove that kind of chain of custody, show where that tree came from. But then also it's we're still learning about kratom and these natural compounds. And so, being able to now, okay, validate and keep that product safe. But then now if we can start getting that consumer to actually say record more of their interaction benefits that they receive from that individual type alkaloid profile, that's just going to keep elevating all these natural products in a really great way that I think will give us consumers more of the benefits we're looking for and less of the side effects that we don't want.
As I'm absorbing and listening to you, uh, your intense knowledge of all this, and you take that energy and you put it into ether and the quality, the quality control stuff.
Mhm.
And by the way, I think engineers of all the people, all the professions on earth, thank God AI will never be able to replace what you do. But anyway, you're putting all that energy and the quality and all that into ether, and there are a few things floating around like Tomcat, which I don't know a lot about, uh,
Yeah, yeah.
uh, um, or Kava or things like that. Down the road, will some of these
Yeah,
come
exactly.
under
Yep.
your umbrella?
Yes, yeah. So I mean that's where I mean kratom's amazing beneficial plant for me for certain needs, but there's all sorts of other plants and botanicals out there that have other use cases. So Tongkat Ali is a great example that Tongkat helps actually both males and females produce more testosterone and make
Wow.
it more bioavailability. And
Wow.
and we know, a lot more now from say fitness athletes that as we, as I age as a male, after something like 30, testosterone starts kind of just going down. And
Yeah, I
then
know about
that's
that.
associated with, it's harder to work out, build lean muscle mass. It's harder to keep bone density high. And as you've already mentioned, like that's an absolute critical element to being able to live in such a great quality of life that you have, in your later years. So being able to supplement with Tomcat, I've been able to increase my testosterone levels and
Wow.
kind of keep that
Wow.
youthfulness side alive. So I like to do a lot of blood work, as we kind of mentioned, and yeah, and I've definitely seen a very positive benefit from Tomcat Ali on that side. Kava is another plant that has been around for a very long time. I think it was popular in the 80s and 90s. But then there was, so basically, kava is a plant that comes from the French Polynesian islands, especially like Fiji. And traditionally, this is a shrub bush that grows in the tropical islands. And the roots kind of grow out horizontally, and then they grow down very, very deep. And what they do is they harvest these very long roots because they contain what's called kava lactones. And kava lactones interact with a few different receptors, including the MNDA receptor, which is what ethanol, alcohol interacts with. So this idea of sociability, kind of feel a little bit relaxed. I want to feel a little more
Wow.
social.
Is there a
That
coffee, kava coffee now? Is there a coffee that you can drink with like kava?
I believe so. Like we
Oh,
do, ETHA, we don't make a coffee kava, but I know there's quite a few
oh,
products
okay.
out there. There's actually a really good one of my business partners here in the Czech Republic. He actually just started releasing a product called Kava Cow. So this is kava mixed with cacao chocolate.
Ah,
And so this is amazing as far as the relaxation, the sociability, but then the chocolate.
every
Yeah,
night,
dark chocolate is
92%.
so
Yep.
healthy. Yep. Dark chocolate is so
You're talking
healthy.
about living to 100, you do this.
Yes,
Funny you
yes.
mentioned that.
Yep. So yeah. And that's the other thing too. I think like even products that are currently widely consumed, I think, using what we have available now for testing, track and traceability, and being able to show that, yes, like look at these benefits from dark chocolate. I think there's going to be just a lot more development in that side of really, getting back more to nutrition and food. I mean, I'd much rather eat like a nice, 92% or even 80% cacao chocolate bar
Correct.
than have to take a pill in the morning, right? Like it's like, how
Correct.
do we get to more of that? That's what I want to see the future happen is,
Correct.
okay, I'm just
Yeah,
making
I have
tea,
a
making
month supply
chocolate,
of
like,
this. Yep. 0 grams of sugar added. So
yep.
it ain't pleasant on the taste, but monstrously healthy.
Yeah, yeah. But we're also, what I also like to say is that, I mean, humans, one of our superpowers is being highly, highly adaptable. And so, I mean, along that, so yes, like cacao is very bitter, but I mean, when I was, very young, I wanted to emulate my older brothers and parents. So I would drink coffee because like they were drinking it. And when at that time, I poured in a bunch of sugar, a bunch of milk just to be able to drink it because I didn't like it. But as I actually started to appreciate coffee, now I drink, dark espresso, Italian, Spanish roast, freshly ground, just water pour over and straight black, no cream, no sugar, no anything else. If people kind of transition to that and kind of repeat a few things, you kind of start to develop an appreciation for that dark chocolate, even without the sugar. And so you can kind of
Yep.
let our bodies adapt to it is
Correct.
a great method.
Correct. All right, winding down. Uh, so where can people find out more about Ether in Kratom? And I'm gonna have all the websites that you provided me in my promo stuff, but you can mention that. And the last thing, uh, um, because you told me to ask this, so I'm not asking this without your guidance. Is there a special offer and a discount for people who want to begin their journey, who are listening to this broadcast?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can definitely find out more on our webpage, ethanaturals.com.
Okay,
And we do have everything from blog articles. We do a weekly podcast, and more importantly, we really like to get interaction with customers, anybody we can. So if you have questions, please reach out to us, and we have special sections where we'll definitely get back to you on email or however you reach out to us. We're on social, at ETHA Naturals, but also if you have great questions, we'll get that into our podcast rotations and really try to deep dive into it. So we're really passionate about that side. So please reach out to us, and any way you find us, we will definitely find a way to respond.
perfect. By the way, not because I'm sitting here talking to you, well, in part, but I went experimenting and looking around. I don't know if I mentioned this maybe before we went on air, but I listened. I'm halfway through that interview you did with Dr. Michelle Jorgensen, the dentist.
Yes.
Wow. Wow. What a phenomenal, uh, just a phenomenal. And I started looking at, you have a whole bunch of interviews and short YouTubes up there. Really interesting stuff. And I was filling my head with this. So, Alexander Karp, this was good stuff that we did here. Uh, um, Absolutely great stuff. And you can come back here anytime, put together some panels, some people, people who take kava and kava, people who take kratom, and when talk about it. Hey, I'm open to anything because as a card carrying member of AARP, I sit in this chair 12 hours a day, and I'm always looking for diversity and things, especially when I believe in something and listening to you, you know your stuff. You know your stuff. And so come back. And I can't thank you enough for your time. And I'm so glad that we kind of found each other out there in social media somehow, and it was great. So uh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you. Yeah, I appreciate your time. Appreciate you
Yes.
reaching out, and
Yeah.
yeah, definitely enjoyed everything we've been talking about. And so I know this is just the start because there's a
Yeah,
lot of
just a lot
synergy.
of stuff just to start. So I'm going to stop recording. Don't leave. We're going to two-minute wrap. And actually, this kind of made my day because you kind of filled my head with a lot of stuff. Not that it needs to be filled anymore, but it's filled. Thank you, Alexander.
Oh, yeah, no, thank you for listening. I appreciate it.